treatment for sick children and they die.
Yeah,
so it's just an illusion.
No, how then, in their minds, do inherited diseases work? I mean, the baby that has attention deficit disorder doesn't know better to think right or wrong.
Well, we'll talk about that actually next week with Christian Science or Scientology, who also doesn't believe in psychotropic drugs either. That they believe it, again, an illusion. You have to remember, I think Mary Baker Eddy is probably right on top of what she's thinking, is right in thinking with 1875 medical science. And I'm surprised that Christian Science has in fact lasted through what we have discovered in medical science with all sorts of other medical issues, that we know that disease is a cell that has, cancer is a cell that's become this big. We don't know how to fix it yet. We can treat it in some ways. We don't always know all the causes, but we know what it is. Whereas the Christian scientists would say it's just an illusion. Your sickness is just an illusion, and the problem is you're not holding right, you're holding falsity in the place in your head where you should be holding truth. Okay, so again, it's very 19th century. Mary Baker Eddy and Christian Scientists believe that they are the ones who are actually restoring the teaching of the ancient church. So, that is a very common theme throughout all of these American heresies. Jehovah's Witnesses, this is the real teaching of Jehovah. The Mormons, this is what Jesus really did, the Book of Mormon, and it's the real teaching, right? So again, Christian Scientists do the same thing. And the scientist name, to put the word scientist into your title in the 19th century was certainly a badge, because the world was beginning to very much, and we do today, worship science, right? The world was really moving in the Industrial Revolution, advances in medicine, technology was beginning to take effect to quite a degree in that century, so much so that to add the word scientist on there is really gives the impression to people that, like science, it's reliable, it's reputable, and can be done through research. You can prove it again and again through research. And in fact, Mary Baker Eddy started in 1881 the Massachusetts Metaphysical College, which is where they train practitioners as a part of their headquarters. Their worship and organizational structure is very centralized. All practitioners are members of a local church and are members of the mother church in Boston. And there's a self-perpetuating board in Boston. Again, another common trait of heresies, that they have a board that is self-perpetuating. They do not make public their finances, any of that sort of stuff. And if a member of the board dies or goes off, it is other members of the board who choose, rather than the people involved in the organization who have a say who their leadership is. There are no pastors in the sense of having a rector like you do here at St. John's. They have what they call readers, and it's a 3-year term. They lead worship and they read passages from the Bible and from Science and Health during the service. There's no preaching per se during the service. A lot of hymn singing and then reading of these things. And the idea of revelation is that it's been fulfilled in Mary Baker Eddy, and that all other teaching is forbidden in the church. So self-reliance and self-sufficiently through correct thinking and practice is the doctrine of Christian Science. So if you just think right, not only will you be saved, but if you think right and practice the principles of Scientology, you won't be sick. Everything will be hunky-dory, and you won't have to worry about anything. Isn't that great? So, anyway, and that's it. I said a short presentation on Mary Baker Eddy. So, in honesty, the last stuff that I read about Christian Science, it's a dying group. I think medical science, the reality of medical science is certainly, I think there are enough, what Mary Baker Eddy was tapping into in a desire in the 19th century certainly exists, but I think it's been taken over by things like tarot and things of that nature,
Ancient philosophy?
Ancient people going for ancient philosophy, or mostly making it up as they go along. They have angels and tarot cards and Reiki, trying to use some sort of ancient healing arts with your energies and things like that. So I think that is really people who are looking for an alternative to the way that this works will be more likely to go for that sort of a heresy than they will for the type of heresy that is so organized. It's just completely disorganized.
I came late, so I didn't hear. What is their position on Christ?
They believe that he was the perfect example of how to be divine, and that we should
believe in his divinity.
I don't think that they would have him any more divine than you or me if we had right doctrine and put away false thinking. So, right away. Nice buildings, though. Got a nice one right by my house. On Kirchable, which is on the outside altar.
They have the reading rooms.
Yeah.
Christian Science reading room, and we said this last week as we were breaking up. When was the last time you went into a reading room? I've never been in one. Oh, I take that back. I went through the one at the Boston headquarters. Jennifer lived in Boston for a while. When I was courting her, we went for the nickel tour out of curiosity.
That was wonderful.
And so we had to walk through a reading room. But you do see them. I never see anybody coming and going in there. And quite frankly, what is probably their most well-known thing besides the reading room? The Monitor, the Christian Science Monitor, which actually is a pretty well-reported newspaper, but even they've given up their print edition now. They are all online, and I think that's they'll see if they continue to have that influence that they had when they were a hard copy print edition.
How do they recruit? When the Mormons go out, the Jehovah's Witnesses go
I think
out.
it's just word of mouth. You know, the Grosse Pointe News always has articles by Christian Science practitioners in the pastor's corner. I always think that's funny because they're not pastors. But it's just word of mouth. They go looking for people. I mean, there's plenty of people. You'll hear word on the street that your neighbor's got cancer, and frequently in sickness, people are desperate for anything. And somebody comes in and tells them that they can be healed through their own mind. You know, that sickness is an illusion. They'll grasp at anything.
Did you already talk about Jehovah's Witnesses?
That was last week. We talked about Jehovah's Witnesses. It's online. You have to come to the office and look on the computer
Print it out
and watch it. No, it's a video, so you have to watch
Oh,
it.
it's a video.
Yeah, see the video cameras on.
It's the real thing.
So the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses are already online, and this will be on probably Monday or Tuesday.
Have you baptized any Christian Science?
I have not, and I think I have baptized Jack Mormons, former Mormons, never a Jehovah's Witness, and never a Christian Scientist. I think probably because, quite frankly, I think I've only met one or two Christian Scientists in my life. Again, a very small sect of people. So, has anybody ever met a Christian Scientist?
My 10th grade high school teacher was.
10th grade high school teacher.
And
So.
she left teaching to become a reader.
There we go, in the church. So, I think I've met more Jehovah's Witnesses, certainly. I met, like, worked with them, things like that, than I
We meet
certainly.
them all the time.
Well, no, a meeting like they run into you and they try to hand you something. But I mean,
I know.
come to know one on a
Oh.
personal level. You work with. I worked at a restaurant in Philadelphia when I was in college with a guy who was a very devout Jehovah's Witness, and he was a good guy. Mistaken, but a good guy. But it's funny because they tried to advance him to manager, and he wouldn't take the advancement because he. What's it called? Because it would cut into his schedule of his 5 meetings a week at the Jehovah's Witness.
right.
So we want to stay at Cook. So we can do all his meetings. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next week, we will talk all about Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah?
Scientology.
Have to jump on a chair.
Oprah's not a Scientologist. She's just very weird. She's into her own thing. But she's not a Scientologist. But there are plenty of other. John Travolta. Did you know that Tom